as you think of it, is an organ system with many functions. We will cover each of these functions in turn. Protection. Your integumentary system is all about barriers. The chemical component of your barrier serves to minimize growth of pathogenic bacteria with a secretion called sebum. Well, you call that oil. Sebum is slightly acidic and slightly antimicrobial. We also have a chemical secretion, melanin, that gives us protection against ultraviolet radiation from the sun. The multiple layered nature of skin makes it a waterproof and thick physical barrier. And lastly, there are phagocytic immune cells living in our skin that form a biological barrier. Sweating. Sweating allows us to use our skin to maintain body temperature. And since waste molecules are released into our sweat, that means that sweating is also a form of excretion. It should not be surprising to see that your skin provides sensory information for your nervous system. Thermoreceptors detect heat and cold. Meissner's corpuscles are superficial touch receptors. You would use these to feel a bug crawling on your skin. Nociceptors detect pain from damage. And Paxinian corpuscles are deep touch receptors that detect deep pressure. Your integumentary system is an endocrine gland as well. Upon exposure to sunlight, our deep cells in a layer called the epidermis release cholecalciferol, D3, and ergocalciferol, D2, to the blood supply. You can see from this diagram that vitamin D is incredibly important. It helps with immune system function, calcium levels, and bone mineralization, muscle cells, calcium transport, cell division and cell growth, and even insulin secretion. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. So get outside for a few minutes and go make your vitamin D. We also use our skin to move more or less blood through the body. When you're hot or exercising, the blood vessels deep in the skin dilate to increase blood flow. This allows more blood to enter the surface of your body to cool it off faster. When you're cold, the reverse happens. The blood vessels constrict, allowing less blood into the skin to prevent it from getting too cold. We refer to this more versus less blood flow through the skin as the blood reservoir. But it's not that you're storing blood in the skin, however. Here's what I want you to do. Answer these questions in the discussion board. Skin has 2 layers with shared function and many tissue types. The third layer here, the hypodermis, is attached but isn't considered a layer of the skin because it does not share function with the organ. The superficial layer of skin is the epidermis, and it contains stratified squamous epithelia. The main cell type are keratinocytes, named after the protein they make, keratin. Keratin makes these cells relatively hard and waterproof and allows the epidermis to serve as a waterproof barrier. Included in the epidermis are melanocytes, which secrete melanin, Langerhans or dendritic cells that phagocytize pathogens, and Merkel cells, which are sensory receptors. Within the epidermal layer are sublayers. Take note of these from deep to superficial, and we'll discuss each a little on the next slide. These sublayers are all considered stratified squamous epithelia but obviously have different functions. If you've ever had a blister, the epidermis was the thin top of that blister. The stratum basal. This sublayer is where mitosis of keratinocytes takes place and is therefore regenerative. Melanocytes and Merkel cells can be found in this sublayer as well. The stratum spinosum. The keratinocytes here slowly change their shape, forming desmosomes to create a strong and flexible web. Then dendritic cells can be found here, and the keratinocytes carry melanin granules that were formed in the stratum basal by melanocytes. Stratum granulosum. In this sublayer, keratinocytes begin to make pre-keratin granules. The keratinocytes may enter this sublayer alive, but as they're pushed toward the surface, they die. The stratum lucidum is only found in thick skin. This is an extra sublayer of keratinized dead cells for protection from abrasion. And stratum corneum, the superficial sublayer of keratinized dead cells for barrier and protection from abrasion. The dermis always contains two and only two sublayers of different tissue types. In the papillary sublayer, we have areolar connective tissue. It houses the capillary beds that support the epidermis, loops, Meissner's corpuscles, and nerve endings of nociceptors. The finger-like projections, called dermal papillae, help increase surface area for the connection of the two layers, but they also result in ridges on the surface. These ridges might help with gripping, and you call them fingerprints. Reticular, the thickest part of skin. This sublayer of dense, irregular connective tissue houses larger blood vessels, Pacinian corpuscles, and all the appendages of skin. And remember, the hypodermis is not really part of the skin. It is made of adipose tissue and stores energy. It's a shock absorption cushion and provides insulation for the body. In addition to melanin in the dermis, other pigments from lifestyle can find their way into the dermis. People who drink a lot of carrot juice can get beta-carotene, or the orange, collected and turn orange. Increased blood flow in the dermis makes us blush, and even colloidal silver can turn us blue. This photomicrograph is showing melanin granules in the epidermis. Anatomically speaking, the organ called skin is the dermis and epidermis only. All the other structures are little organs in and of themselves. There are many types of sweat glands in the body. Collectively, they're really called sudoriferous glands. Eccrine. These are found on palms of hands, soles of feet, and forehead. They release sweat for temperature regulation and are fully functional from birth. Apocrine are found in the axillary and anogenital regions. These glands become functional at puberty and secrete a sweat for scent purposes. Ceruminous glands are modified sweat glands in our ears that secrete cerumen or earwax, and mammary glands are also modified sweat glands that secrete milk. Sebaceous glands are associated with hair follicles, even the peach fuzz type of hair follicle. As a result, they are everywhere except the palms of hands and soles of feet. These glands secrete sebum, which lubricates and softens skin. And remember, it's part of the barrier. Hair itself provides warmth, protection, and sensation. Structurally, there are several layers to the hair shaft and many structures in the hair follicle. Hard keratin The cells that form hair are essentially keratinocytes that secrete a different type of keratin. As a result, a shaft of hair is made of flattened cells in layers and sublayers. The layers of a shaft of hair are the outer cuticle, middle cortex, and innermost medulla. The hair shaft itself is produced by the cells lining the hair papilla in the hair follicle. This close-up diagram of the hair follicle shows the hair papilla that forms the shaft of your hair as well as the connective tissue sheath and layers of the follicle itself. While the hair follicles are anchored in the dermis, they are made of epithelial tissue. Now that you have met your first organ system, we can take this opportunity to look at the steps of tissue repair. In other words, when you cut yourself, how does it heal? There are 3 steps to tissue repair that occur in order in every tissue and organ of the body. Some organs will move through these 3 steps faster than others. The ability to repair is based on blood supply and tissue type. Stratified squamous epithelia of the epidermis is supported by a rich blood supply in the dermis and formed by regenerative cells, so it heals quickly. Whereas cartilage with very little blood supply will heal slowly. Let's look at each step specifically. Inflammation. When you cut the tissues and blood vessels, the blood does enter the interstitial space. In other words, it bleeds. The cytoplasm from the damaged cells, platelets that trigger clotting, and immune system cells like macrophage and mast release chemical factors. Those factors increase blood flow to the site via vasodilation. But they also make the capillaries extra permeable. This means that there's more blood flow to the site of the injury, and the plasma and immune system cells move out of the capillary into the interstitial space. This causes 4 things to happen, and they are known as the cardinal signs of inflammation. Redness, from more blood here. Edema, puffy from extra fluid in the interstitial space. Heat, extra blood increases temperature at the site. And pain, increased pressure from the edema. While that seems bad, inflammation triggers mitosis of surviving cells in the dermis, blood vessels, and stratum basal. Organization, the next step in tissue repair. Once inflammation is completed, mitosis of the surviving cells begins to replace lost tissue. You can see epithelial, connective, and blood vessel tissues growing. This new tissue is called granulation tissue, and it is the hallmark sign of organization. Regeneration. Here we see that the tissues and blood vessels are fully grown and the dead tissue is replaced. Within the dermis, the extra fibers around the wound site contract to stabilize the area. This causes a ridge on the surface or scar. This fibrosis, or extra fiber, is the hallmark sign of regeneration.